Hello my intelligent friends, welcome back to Tea and Lit. In today's video we're going to be discussing how I annotate my books. So this is 1984 by George Orwell. We read this book as our November read in 2020 because it's an election year. So you can see here what kind of some of my notes and annotations look like. In today's video I want to share with you guys kind of how I annotate, why I annotate, what tools I use to annotate, all that jazz. So let's talk about it. First, I'm going to talk about what you need. Second, I'll talk about how I do it. And then third, I'll talk about why I do it. Because I feel like a lot of you are probably just, skimming the internet looking for like 5 or 6 different videos on how to explain this process. And you don't really care about why I annotate. So we'll start with the important things. So the tools that I use for annotation are as follows. First off is my highlighters. I use 5 different colored highlighters. These are just Sharpie highlighters, smear guard. I don't know what special thing there is about these, like what their name is or anything. I just get a pack of these at the beginning of the school year when everything's on sale, and they serve me. So I use 5 different colors. Each of the 5 different colors represents something different. If you have any of the notes that we've put together for some of our reads, then you'll already be a little bit familiar with this process. But first off, pink is questions that I have or vocabulary that I don't know. So, for example, in this book, The Sacred Principles of Ingsoc, Newspeak, Doublethink, the Mutability of the Past. So that was something that I highlighted in pink here in 1984. And in a second, I'll talk about my post-it notes, but I just wrote down what is Ingsoc. So, and I'll also do the same thing with any vocabulary that's new to me. Just highlight it in pink. The next one is blue, and I use blue for problems and conflict. So anything that's like a very plot-heavy point. And I knew that in 1984 we were going to be talking a lot about the plot specifically. So any sort of conflict or resolution is something that I'll highlight in blue. So for example, in this story, it talks about how they changed the books. So the line that I highlighted here, the whole literature of the past will have been destroyed. Chaucer, Shakespeare, Milton, Byron. They'll exist only in Newspeak versions, not merely changed into something different, but actually changed into something contradictory of what they used to be. So that feels like a problem to me in this world building, and so I have highlighted it in blue. Next up is green, and this is world building and kind of setting and things like that. So in 1984, I would have highlighted something like, I don't think I marked any green. Oh, I have one green. A new poster had suddenly appeared all over London. It had no caption and represented simply the monstrous figure of the Eurasian soldier, 3 or 4 meters high, striding forward with expressionless Mongolian face and enormous boots, a submachine gun pointed from his hip. So it's just a description of the poster. And so I highlighted something like that in green. Things that are like in fantasy worlds, like basically the whole of The Hobbit is green, so that. Next up is purple. Purple is my favorite color, and so I chose purple to be any quotes or anything that's a favorite of mine. Anything that I think is funny or interesting or clever, anything that kind of sticks out to me for some reason. So, for example, this quote here, the 2 aims of the party are to conquer the whole of the surface of the earth and to extinguish once and for all the possibility of independent thought. That seemed like a really plot relevant point, and the little sticky I put there said, summed up the entire story. A peace that was truly permanent would be the same as permanent war. That feels like a very quotable line. So anything that kind of sticks to my heart, I will mark in purple. Then finally is orange, and orange is characters, character development. You can see I don't have a lot here. I had more for Dorian Gray, but anything that describes the characters. He moved over to the window, a smallish, frail figure, the meagerness of his body merely emphasized by the blue overalls, which were uniform of the party. His hair was very fair, his face naturally sanguine, his skin roughened by coarse soap and blunt razor blades, and the cold of the winter that had just ended. So something like that describes our main character, Winston Smith, and so he is orange. So that quote would be orange. I do tend to be an over highlighter, I'm not gonna lie. I do highlight a lot, but I like to have more highlights than fewer highlights for something like this that I'm doing like a proper evaluation of. The next thing I use I have 5, I don't know where they are now. Oh, the orange one's right there. But these little flags, these little sticky note, post-it note flags, and I use these to write down things just with a black pen or a blue pen. So you can see here, I have just words. What is Ingsoc was that one. How did this place come to be? Just little notes or questions for myself in the future. Ink pencils, as though things can always be erased. They use only ink pencils in this world, that I thought was kind of an interesting thing that we talked about in our discussion. I noticed that didn't seem to be a lot of old people, so I wrote on there, are there no old people? That feels like a problem to me. So yeah, just write little notes to myself using these guys. The next thing I use are Post-its, regular size Post-it notes, and you can see a lot of them here. Now, I don't always use these. I will very often use like another notebook, but I'm at the end of my current reading notebook, and so I can't. But I will just write notes to myself. This one is WTF, because this book really jacked me up. But it'll just be like a quick summary of that chapter to remind myself where I am in the story. So what I tend to have happen is that I'll be trying to think of like an event in the story, and I don't know, I know it's at the beginning of the book or the middle of the book or the end of the book, but I don't know which chapter of the book it's in. These little notes will tell me which chapter I'm meant to be looking at, because it gives me a quick summary. So Winston has accepted his impending death, but will write in defiance. Children are little SHITs that rat on their parents, and the family across the hall I have no idea what this is. Oh, a desperate mother with a dumb husband that coordinates the sports. So that's just a little explanation of what's going on in the story at that moment that will then help me to go back to something. So if I'm thinking, oh, who are the little children? And I can go back and just read my Post-it note and know where it's at in the story. So that's what I use. That's how I use it. Let's talk about why I annotate. I do not annotate all of my books like this. I typically annotate books like this that are going to get a discussion or an evaluation. So I annotate my books like this that are going to be discussed for the channel or book club books, or for school. I annotate for things because sometimes you have like open book tests and finals and things, and so you kind of need your book well marked. And so that is one of the reasons that that's the biggest reason why I mark my books like this, is so that I can engage productively and with better knowledge, to be prepared to engage about a book. This is how I annotate. Everybody annotates differently, and that's also important to know. I annotate fiction, like casual books that I read, differently. So I use these little guys. They're clear. And I don't use color specific. I always say I'm going to, and then I end up not doing it because I actually don't take my eyes off the book and I just grab a thing. So you can see how this is clear here. I like that because I can still read. My face is super close. I can still read the words here because it's clear. Whereas with these, I can't read the words anymore that are tucked behind it. But that's fine because I have my note, and it's usually, I can just move it. It's not a huge deal. It's not the end of the world for me to do that. But for something like this, that's just kind of like a casual book that I'm reading and engaging with. And if there's ever anything that I want to mark up, I will just grab one of these little guys and do that. So there is a difference with the way I engage with books. I'm not intentional about needing those Post-its. It's usually when I get to something that's interesting. So there are some books that I've read that have nothing. So like Sense and Sensibility, I really didn't like that book. There was nothing that I felt the need to like deeply annotate in it. Whereas this book had a few things that I wanted to annotate. This book has a review in case you want to check that out. I will post a link to it. But this book that's getting a conversation, a discussion, a book club, a school paper, all of those things will get more heavy annotations. Like I said, I only do this Post-it note thing when I don't have a reading journal, or if I can't use a reading journal. I know that sometimes in school you can get your book, but you can't get your reading journal, and so the Post-its are one way to help with that. And I do them at the end of each chapter. So that is how and why I annotate my books. Super personal. Everybody does it different. This is just the way I do it. So thank you guys very much for watching me gab on about annotations, and I'll catch you guys later. Bye.